Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, Bruce. I'm doing fine. Big night. The Oilers drafted a young player from the Quebec League, an attacking forward, skilled forward Xavier Bourgault, with, what was it, the 22nd overall pick in the NHL draft?
22nd officially, 21st in reality, because Arizona Coyotes had a pick stripped from them. So they had number 11, but they lost it due to some transgressions during the what do they call that, prospect get together? Anyway, the thing they do the thing they do just before the draft, or they used to, and they broke some rules, and they had 2 draft picks, the second last year and the first this year, taken away from them.
Oh, the combine, is that
it? The combine, yeah.
It was before the combine that they did.
Yeah.
They were doing it throughout the year, right?
They did stuff that was verboten, and they got slapped down hard. So anyway, so you can say 21st, but it'll go in the books as number 22. And they had number 20. But they chose to trade down to add an extra draft pick late in the 3rd round.
So we'll talk about that, Bruce. We will talk about the signing, essentially, of Zach Hyman. We don't know exactly the term, but his age, both Elliot Friedman said it's a done deal. He's coming to Edmonton, and his agent has said the same, that Zach Hyman is coming here. And there's also a little comment from Elliot Friedman that our colleague Kurt Levins is reporting about, one of the reasons Larson leaving Edmonton, having to do with essentially a pretty prickly fan base. So we'll talk about that, because that's certainly got people up in arms. Bruce, let's start with the draft. I'll just say, first of all, I haven't watched any of these players, so I can't say who's a good player, who's a bad player, whether this is a good pick, whether this is a bad pick. I did look at where the 17 top public experts, from Bob McKenzie and people like Low Tide, and here's a list: Steve Korianis, Scott Wheeler, Corey Pronman, Ryan Kennedy, Craig Button. You get the idea. 17 of these people who rate them every year, and they do watch them.
Yep.
And they are far more expert, and they rank the players. So what I like to do is see what's the consensus of the experts. And on Xavier Bourgault, the consensus is that he was the 25th best player in this draft from the experts. And the highest person was Alan Mitchell of Low Tide. And Alan Low Tide Mitchell is another way of putting it. And the second highest was Bullet Brad McPherson.
Blue Bullet Brad.
And what I know about these two guys, especially Low Tide, I think really just essentially tries to go by the numbers.
Yep.
Tries to do as much as he can, do the math and look at their point scoring. Anything else he can go by in terms of a number. That's mainly what he has for most of them, is point scoring, and rate them on that, because he really believes that's a good way. And I've looked at past drafts, and one year out of, I think I've looked at 3 drafts, and one, Low Tides has a pretty good record in terms of predicting future success. So he had Xavier Bourgault higher than anyone else in this draft, 14th overall. So what this tells me, Bruce, is that the math likes this player quite a bit. Really, his numbers from the Quebec League, I think it was how many points did he get? What did he get last year? Anyway, his numbers are good. And the Bullet Brad also goes by the numbers. And then he blends in the consensus of the experts. He has his own list of experts. And then I think it's about 50-50. And he had the same player higher, 17th overall. They were the highest. The lowest of the experts, well, Sean Patrick Ryan, who sometimes writes for the Cult of Hockey and has got a good eye for talent, he didn't have Bourgault in his top 31. He only ranks up to 31 players.
Right.
And Steve Korianis, the draft analyst, he had him, the lowest was 46th overall by Korianis. So, wow. Bruce, The Oilers didn't reach to take this player. They took him right where he was expected to be taken, right in this area of the draft. It reminds me of two picks in recent years. The Jordan Eberle pick, another highly skilled attacking forward. I think that the numbers liked, and Kailer Yamamoto, another highly skilled attacking forward, taken at about 20 something, early 20 something in the draft.
Both went at exactly number 22, the exact same number that Bourgault went. All three are smallish, right shot, skilled forwards.
Yeah. So there's that. So again, we haven't seen this player. We can't comment on him, but there's that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, well, further to your rankings, I mean, Bob McKenzie's consensus ranking had him at number 20, McKean's Hockey at 21, Sportsnet at 22, Dauber Prospects, which is one of the services I cited in my post, had him at number 15. And on the other hand, Draft Prospects Hockey, who I also cited in my post, had him at 35. And basically that was kind of the range. But I mean, you look at all these rankings, where 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 different rankings listed here where I'm looking at it, which is his page on eliteprospects.com. And, you know, he was rated fairly highly. The lowest one here was number 37 by Elite Prospects themselves. And otherwise, you know, all the way up to 15 or so. And as you say, Alan Mitchell had him at 14. And Alan, you know, he's been doing this for quite some time now, and he's quite open about, you know, his methodology. He's not saying it's right. What he wants is something different that's done in a different manner, just to give sort of a different view, just like we look at scoring chances different from how Natural Stat Trick does. You know, open a second eye on the subject. Maybe it'll show you something you didn't expect. And he doesn't pretend that his rankings are better, or for that matter worse, just that they're just a different way of analyzing the paltry bit of information that we've got. And it's not necessarily better than Eyes On, but it's sort of a check and balance.
Just shows you, because I think Alan's list has proven to be useful. And some years it's been the best list, or the second best list in terms of identifying talent. It just shows you how strong a proxy point scoring is for real talent, both for forwards and defensemen. People in hockey who can put up points on the attack are usually pretty damn good hockey players, and better than the other guys who don't put up the points. And often, if you just go by that, you don't know anything else. You don't even you don't have to watch the players. You're just going by that one metric, points scored. Pretty good metric, and it's been in hockey for since the start,
over a century. Yeah,
well, since I think the first goal was recorded in the late 1870s, so 150 years of the point, and still going strong as probably the best stat to go by in terms of rating a hockey player. So there you go.
They did goals originally. It took them until about the 1920s to really start getting assists down. But if you look at the early league, you see guys that had 22 goals and 1 assist and stuff, and you kind of wonder how they're tracking them. But I mean, Allen's method, just for one example, picked out Andrew Mangiapane in his draft year. And I think Mangiapane actually went undrafted, and I think it was the second year that he got picked, something like 166 overall. And, I mean, how likely is that, a guy in his, picked way down there in the 6th round, and yet here he is in the NHL and a rising star, as far as I can see, down there in Calgary. That's the math, as Alan puts it, the stats single him out as a prospect of interest, even though scouts were poo-pooing him for being too small or too this or not enough that. And the stats turned out didn't lie.
So, Bruce, the Oilers, there was when isn't there controversy? When isn't there controversy? And it always surprised me in the draft, because how many people actually watch these players? I mean, at least when you're talking about like Duncan Keith or Zach Hyman, people have seen these players a bit usually, or a lot. But with these drafted players, most people haven't seen them play at all. But there was don't sell Oilers fans short when it comes to stirring the pot and complaining and getting mad. There was a fair bit of it today. I noticed on social media because there was a rumor the Oilers were going to take a goalie. And I think that the Oilers, if Sebastian Cossa, the gigantic and talented goalie for the Oil Kings, had been available at 19, it's pretty obvious the Oilers were going to take that goalie. When he was taken 15th overall by Detroit, did they trade up to get that pick?
Yes.
Yeah.
They traded past the Oilers to get up to 15.
Yeah. So
when they made the trade, I was going, no, there goes Detroit. There goes Yzerman zooming past Edmonton. Watch him take the goalie. And sure enough.
So people though thought then, because there was two goalies, and actually according to the experts, the public experts at least, there's a Swedish goalie by the name of Jesper Wallstedt, and he was rated now Cossa was rated, the consensus for him was 19th overall, okay, and for Wallstedt it was 10th. So the experts thought he was going to get taken 10th. The consensus idea was, and Cossa 19th. So when it looked like one of those two goalies was going to fall to the Oilers, and you could see that by about the the 14th pick, you could see there's only one other team there that's going to think about taking, and the other ones aren't. So I thought, the Oilers are going to get one of these goalies if they want one. Right. Turns out they didn't. Turns out that Jesper Wallstedt was not as high on the Oilers list as it was on the consensus of experts list. Doesn't mean the Oilers are wrong. The consensus in these drafts in terms of predicting who's going to be a good player often is not very strong at all for doing that. Individual people making picks are often better than the consensus, is what I've seen in analyzing three drafts really closely. And what the Oilers decided to do was to trade their pick and move down 2 slots, and then get the 90th overall pick in this draft. And I actually think that's just general in a general sense. It always comes down to who you pick with these players, but in a general sense, this is a good idea. I think they didn't get bad value in terms of moving down 2 slots. I think it was worth about the value they gave up and moving down 2 slots was about the same as a 90th pick. But you're multiplying your chances every time you take another player.
Right.
So there's something to be said just for that idea in and of itself. So I like the move, Bruce. They're short of draft picks, as you noted in your post today. Yeah. And so I think that was good business. When you're short of picks, when you're getting value back in the trade in terms of, historical value of picks at these levels, it's a good move. What was your take?
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that pick, whether the Oilers actually use it, or if that's what winds up going to Toronto in this protracted Zach Hyman discussion, or maybe they keep that one and move 116 to Toronto. We'll see. I was looking at that thing, and when it got to number 18, and it was Winnipeg's pick, and I'm going, they're not picking a goalie. They got Hellebuck for the next foreseeable future. And then 19 was Nashville, and they picked a goalie in the first round last year, Askarov, the hotshot goalie last year. I thought, there's no way they're doing it. So I was preparing my post, and I found a picture of Wallstedt, and I wrote a little headline. I said, I did a lead paragraph, Oilers picked the first goalie in the first round for the 3rd time in their history after Grant Fuhrer and Devin Dubnyk, and I had it all ready to go. And I had the great rankings of Wallstedt all picked out, which is number 6 elite prospects, number 12 by McKenzie, number 5 by McKean, number 7 by top 10 in a lot of lists, not just top 20, top 10, and a very highly ranked goalie. And then of course they traded down. I thought, well, maybe they're still going to get him. Then no, of course Minnesota immediately used the pick they got from the Oilers to take the goalie. So that was that. I deleted the picture and I deleted my headline and I deleted my lead paragraph. And
This was Bruce. This move by Ken Holland was aimed directly at you. This was about him getting you.
I don't think so, but he sure pissed off a lot of other people. I was just sort of mildly inconvenienced, but frankly, I wouldn't have minded had they picked the goalie.
Oh, I would have been happy too. I would have been irrationally happy because we all had it in mind that the Oilers wanted a goalie. This was a highly ranked goalie. So having never seen the goalie, never seen these other players, I admit, if they had taken Wallstedt, I would have been, oh, good, they got Wallstedt without, which I think is ridiculous, honestly. And I think most of it, like, I'm going to say this, Bruce, most of the anger from people who have never seen these players, it's ridiculous. They have no idea. And they should take that upon themselves that they don't know these players. And so for them to judge what the Oilers did in terms of selecting this player or that player, come on. Like, what kind of thinking is that you think compared to the scouts who are paid to watch these players? And Bruce, the Oilers scouts, to give them some credit here, in the last 5 years have been pretty good. Now, we don't know the record in the last couple years, right? Because some of the players like Holloway is trending well, for instance, and Carter Savoy and some of the others are trending well, but we still don't know. But if you go last 5 years when Bob Green's been here and Keith Gretzky, I'm not inclined to criticize this group of scouts and just to take it out of hand. They don't know what they're doing and not drafting this goalie or any other player who was available at that time. They wanted another pick. They thought that probably the player they want is still going to be there when they're drafting. So they made the move. And I'm inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm not always inclined to do that. With some of the pro scouting moves, have been less inclined to do that because of the record that we've seen in the last few years. So I've criticized the process, but the process in terms of the amateur scouting in recent years has led to a farm system which finally has some talented hockey players. Right. So that's another reason I would say, like, keep your powder dry here, ladies and gentlemen. You don't know, and these guys probably do. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair, and it's there's a lot of anger out there in the world these days, David, and it manifests itself in strange ways. Speaking of blue bullet, Brad, this is a guy who isn't an angry person. He seems quite a rational fellow. I've known him. I've never met the guy, but I've known him. Been followers of each other, DM'd and stuff for years. Very, very keen on the draft.
Does fantastic work.
And he does, and he has for years. Anyway, he tweeted a couple hours ago. J.D. Burke warned that some players would be falling due to character issues unknown to the general public. Wallstedt is one of those players.
Yeesh. So, well, I don't want to comment on
what
that.
Do we know? What do we know?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's out there. Yeah. There's my greater point is there's always stuff out there that we don't know, and so for us to be saying this guy is greatest thing ever, who the hell knows what's going on? I mean, and I had some interest in Wallstedt because I actually have seen the guy play among the few in the draft this year with all the hockey that's been canceled lately and so on. That he played here in the Hlinka Gretzky Cup as a 15-year-old goalie in 2018, 3 summers ago now. He was a starting goalie for Sweden in that tournament at age 15, same tournament that Philip Broberg came in and lit it up and wound up being the Oilers' first-round pick the next year. So obviously they were aware of the guy, and everybody was aware of the guy, and whatever reason they chose to go in another direction. So let's see what happens is my take, rather than let's crucify the general manager because I liked how the other guy spelled his last name or whatever the reasons are,
I wonder how big this draft controversy will be in years. Like, will we remember this at all, or is this just a one-day thing? Because there's often just those one-day things. But there have been some big ones. Like people, when I said this on Twitter, like, okay, I'm not joining in the group rage here. I can see people are angry. I'm like not doing that. People came back at me And, and I also pointed out, like, I remember how mad people were when all the smart people said, yo, you got to draft that Bennett guy, Sam Bennett, and, not Leon Draisaitl. I remember the outrage that day. So the fans aren't always, sometimes they're right, but they're not always right. But there's been other ones. So just a quick list, Bruce, I did a quick list of controversial ones, and most of them are last in the Twitter age. But the first one is Steve Kelly, Shane Doan. The fans were right in that case.
I was there that day, and the fans were actually chanting "Doan, Doan, Doan" when the Oilers went down to the podium. And of course, Joe McGinley was also still on the board, who would have been a very good pick.
No one was right.
And
so Marc-Antoine Pouliot as opposed to Parise, Draisaitl, Bennett. There was Tyler versus Taylor, a big controversy. Ryan Murray versus Yakupov. Philip Broberry versus Zegras and Caulfield. Nurse and Nikushkin was also a little bit of a controversy, as I recall. And now we have Bourgault versus Wallstedt. I have a feeling this one's going to fade pretty fast, but maybe I'm incorrect about that. If Wallstedt, depends how they, obviously if there's huge separation in their play, it won't fade. So
it just goes on the growing list of Ken Holland's crimes against humanity. The good news is that we're very soon reaching the statute of limitations, that being 280 characters. Once you get past 280 characters, you got to start winnowing some of them out.
Yeah, I think the UN, he's got a date in The Hague coming up is all I'm saying. That guy, that Ken Holland guy.
I've got questions of my own, about Holland, but questioning a draft choice on the night that he's drafted, 18-year-old kid, that ain't it.
It's kind of bad form unless you really are an expert. Like I could see Sean Patrick Ryan having something to say here, and he actually did. I think he was actually pretty charitable about the whole thing. At least in one tweet that I saw. So I can see people who actually do watch these players and having something to say and having an opinion. But this is one of those moments. Like maybe hold off. Bruce, so from the consensus list, we can see who the biggest reaches in the draft were, and I'll go through this quickly because it's not that interesting, I fear, but it is something that I'm interested in. Like, who are the biggest reaches compared to the consensus, and who are the biggest drops? So the biggest reaches, and it's interesting, Bruce, and this is a concept that Brad McPherson has really done great work on. The draft picks at the very top of the draft are worth so much more in terms of than the draft picks later in the draft. And he bases it on career value. So the players taken first overall, when you average them all together, they have a career value of 100. Right. And when you let me just scroll up here, 100. The second pick in the draft has a career value of 84. The third pick, 66. So this shows you on average how much the fourth pick, 57th, by the time you get down to the, let me just see here. I got to rearrange these things a little bit. By the time
these curves, it just dives to the bottom and then flattens right out.
Yeah. By the time you get to the second round, the picks have a value of about 6 or 7 or 8 compared to 100. Mm-hmm. So when the Oilers pick, when the Oilers were picking, let me see,
at 20, they apparently gained value. Brad himself said that by his method, number 107 would make up the difference between 20 and 22, and they actually got a 90. So they came out a little tiny bit ahead there.
So the draft pick at 22, it has a career value of 13.
Right.
So it's about 1/8 of the value of a first. You'd have to trade 8 of those picks to get the value of a first overall pick. So it's when people reach at the top of the draft, actually, even if the consensus says a player should be taken 7th overall, like Mason McTavish, and he's taken 3rd, that is a huge reach in terms of draft value. Like that's some guy who might not be rated very highly might be taken with the 31st overall pick. It's not much of a reach because those picks just aren't that valuable. in comparison. So the biggest reach that I'm seeing is actually Mason McTavish. He was ranked 7th overall by the consensus, and he was taken 3rd. The next biggest reach is Kent Johnson, taken 5th overall. He was ranked 8th. So that's again, in terms of career value, that's a huge reach. And the third one, and this has both things going for it. Tyler Boucher was taken 10th overall, and he was ranked by the consensus as 41st, Bruce. So they 31 points difference. You know what that indicates to me is there is, unless they had some inside information that some other team was really keen about him, that's one where they might have wanted to trade down in the draft a little bit and maybe take a risk. But maybe they love Tyler Boucher so much that they were going to take that risk. But that was the third biggest reach. In terms of drops, where players were ranked high and then dropped, William Eklund was ranked 3rd by the consensus, and he was taken 7th. Right. Brant Clark, and so again, that's a big value drop. Brant Clark, the experts had him at 5th. He was taken at 8th. Dylan Guenther was actually the biggest drop in value, overall value. He was ranked at 4th and was taken at 9th. And Jesper Wallstedt was 4th on that list. He was ranked at 10th and dropped 10 points to 20. But it's about half in terms of the magnitude of the drop. It's about half of the drop of Dylan Guenther's drop in value. So, we'll see. And good luck to the player, to Jesper Wallstedt with his new team. He may well turn out to be a great goalie. I mean, there's the whole thing about such a long time NHL teams have been hesitant drafting goalies in the first round. I think it's happened. What is it? 10 times in the last 14 years, or
less than once a year in recent times.
10 times in the last 14 years.
Sounds right.
A handful of those first picks have turned out of those 10 that were taken. And some of them haven't. But this is the nature of the first round. Most players taken after the top 10 in the first round, it starts to be like a 1/3 bet or a 1/4 bet that they're going to be a decent player.
Yeah, I had some people arguing that you can't be taking a chance on a goalie because you can get a goalie in a later round or in a trade. But you know what? You have defensemen and forwards in the first round who don't pan out, and you can also certainly get defensemen and forwards in a trade. So, this idea that somehow, I mean, what's different about the goalie is that you do need to hit it out of the park to really win draft choice. It's not like you can put him on the 3rd pairing or the bottom 6, right? He's either in the net or he's not.
Good point.
So, I mean, Mason McTavish, one publication, the Draft Analyst, they listed different categories of player. They had McTavish listed number 1 with best shot, best sense, hockey sense, best defensive forward, and most competitive. And all the scouts that saw this guy playing at the U18s apparently were just raving about him. I had a friend saying that I was talking to a scout this morning, and he told me he would go top 5, couldn't stop gushing about him. This is Mason McTavish.
Who, he had a great tournament apparently. Like he just took his game to a new level. Who had all those? Who had him as the toughest shot? Who said that?
The Draft Analyst.
The draft.
That's Steve Kornianos.
Yeah. Unless he had him at 9th overall in the draft. Unless he's changed his ranks.
But they did. They were He had him as number 9, but he was number 1 on all these different lists, and there were different things. Best defensive forward, best hockey sense, most competitive. Those are very different.
Why I'd be taking that guy? Sounds good to me. Anyway, congratulations to all these players drafted today. What a journey they've been on, and tons of hard work and from their parents and coaches. So, way to go, gentlemen, for getting drafted. And there was one controversial pick. Was it Logan Mailloux?
Logan Mailloux, yeah.
Now he wanted to back out of it. He asked not to be drafted because he's involved in a sex. Is it a criminal case in Sweden?
I'm not sure of all the details. I know it's a sordid situation, and he's under the gun. Montreal Canadiens, they issued an official statement when they drafted him in the first round. They didn't just draft the guy; they drafted him in the first round.
And it was a reach.
And by drafting prospect Logan Mailloux with the 31st overall pick, the Habs organization not only selected a promising hockey player, but also a young man who recently admitted to making a serious mistake. Canadians are aware of the situation, by no means minimize the severity of Logan's actions. Logan understands the impact His recent public statement is a genuine acknowledgement of his poor behavior and the first step on his personal journey. We're making a commitment to accompany Logan on his journey by providing him with the tools to mature and the necessary support to guide him in his development. So, raising awareness and all these.
Was he 17 when this happened? So a young offender even?
Potentially, yeah.
Listen,
These guys are young, obviously. And they make mistakes. Lots of young guys make mistakes. And lots of
people make mistakes. He made a mistake. And I give him credit for apologizing. I give him even more credit. I thought he took the correct. I thought his stand was very interesting, and I thought it was a good stand to take where he asked not to be drafted.
Yeah.
And
so what
I think NHL teams should have respected that. Like, honestly, just give him time to to prove himself again as a human being, and just take the heat off of him, because this increases now the intensity of the glare and the heat again on this. It's not what was needed by anybody in this situation. I think it was a mistake by the Montreal Canadiens. And, I'm all for second chances, especially for young people who make a mistake. But he asked for a certain course of action. I think it was a reasonable and considered an adult thing to do. And, this is more, it kind of reeks of the Al Davis just win baby stuff, from the 70s, which was kind of a 70s attitude. And the world's changed since then. And I just think they should have listened to this kid, to his agent, to his family, and just teams should have respected that and not taken him in this draft. So that's my thought.
It's kind of the opposite of that situation last year with that kid in Arizona, where they eventually renounced the guy and threw him back into the pool after they'd wasted a pick on the guy. Remember that? Arizona?
Yeah.
They didn't have any picks till the fourth round, and when they got one, they used one on this kid, and they kind of took the same argument that Montreal did. And they got so much blowback on it that they wound up renouncing the pick. And we'll see what kind of blowback they get in Montreal.
We can't even remember that kid's name. What was his name? Like, do you even remember?
No, there's been a lot of names go through the filter, and since that one. But here's a name for you, Mark Bergevin, whose past history included time with Chicago Blackhawks right at the time of their scandal. It's all over the news these days. And, Mark Bergevin, to be taking this step as GM of Montreal, is putting himself squarely in the spotlight. And he personally is going to take some serious blowback. And I'm sorry, he is not an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah, I think he should have. I've made my point. All right. Bruce, let's talk about Zach Hyman, and I'll give a little bit of the background here because I wrote about it most recently. Elliot Friedman was on Bob Stauffer's show, and Bob was wondering if Toronto was going to have another go at Hyman, right? And Freeman basically shut that down. He said, "I think it's done." Quote, "I think it's done. I think Hyman is going to be an Oiler one way or another." And Bob returned to that idea later that maybe it's not done between the Leafs and Hyman. And Elliot just said, "I think you guys are getting Hyman, just so you know." Mm-hmm. And when he said that, it was just really clear that Elliot Friedman had talked to either Hyman or Hyman's agent, or someone who knew exactly. That this was later then confirmed later this afternoon. Terry Cochin of the Toronto Sun reports Hyman's agent, Todd Reynolds, quote, "Zach will be signing elsewhere. He won't be returning to Toronto. Agreement in place with Oilers. Holland and Duba is working on compensation." So it's listen, things have fallen apart in the past as recently as the Adam Larson thing, but that was more like an 85, 90% thing. This is sounding like 99.95 in terms of certainty here. And it sounds like the player has decided, and this is going to happen. So Bruce, I'm not going to go back on my initial assessment that this isn't in terms of the long-term risk of the contract. This is a very iffy deal. I still think that. That said, there is a frame, another way of looking at this deal that Mark Spector first argued, and other people have argued, and I actually think it's got a lot of merit. And this is the idea of the McDavid-Draisaitl window.
Yeah.
You have these players, and in the modern NHL, you only have them for as long as they're signed. Connor McDavid will be a free agent. I think he's got 5 years left on his deal.
Yep,
Draisaitl
he
4.
does. Yep.
So coming up fast is faster than we'd like to think is the end of these players' first contracts in Edmonton. There is this window to win now. There's 32 teams in the NHL. You are going to have to take some gambles and some risks if you want to win in the NHL. I have no doubt about that.
Yep.
So if that is the idea, that you're going to get the best possible team that you can put together for the next couple of years, and you're actually going to sell out the future, probably knowingly that you are doing some really risky things for 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now. You're doing that. You know that you're the owner of the team is aware of that. It's not having something pulled over his eyes. Daryl Cates, Ken Holland might not be here 8 years from now, but I think Daryl Cates is hoping to be, or to have his son running the team. This is important to him. So with the idea of winning now and having this McDavid window, I can accept this. I accept this deal. I get this deal. I get that thinking. That makes sense to me. Even though, Mr. Actuarial table that I am in terms of looking at, aging curves of these players, I'm really skeptical about the deal. Bruce, Hyman is probably, for the next couple of years, he's one of the best players I think you could have with Connor McDavid. Because I really do think, from what I've seen of him, and I'm not an expert on this player, but what I seen of him myself and hear about him, he's a really smart defensive hockey player. He's great on the boards. He's tough in front of the net. He doesn't need the puck to succeed. He is a glue player like Patrick Maroon plus that I think is going to work very well with Connor McDavid. And this answers just such a huge question in the Edmonton Oilers lineup. Filling this spot on McDavid's wing, and then having probably Puljujarvi on the other side, so you don't have to keep sliding Leon Draisaitl up there, which I think distorts the team and lessens the team, lessens both of those players. So you got this great first line, you got this great second line with the dynamite line. You might have, Bruce, the top two. The Oilers might have, if you compare the Oilers' top two lines in the NHL to every other team in the NHL, the Oilers might have the top two lines in the NHL in comparison. So I'm liking it in that way. And I'll shut up now. Sorry. Went on for a long time there. What's your thought?
Oh, I wrote at some length today about the Oilers sacrificing of future draft choices, which they've been doing persistently now for the last 5 years and further back than that. But this is the fourth of 5 consecutive years that the Oilers entered the draft minus 1 or 2 draft picks from the full complement of 7, which it seems like an unsustainable long-term policy. But they've reached the point where even if you make a good draft pick on the second day of the draft, the guy's 3 to 5 years away, typically, from making an impact in the NHL, at least a positive impact. And we're 4 to 5 years away from the expiration of both of the Draisaitl and McDavid contracts. So I wrote poorly at first about how the window was closing on McDavid and Draisaitl, which of course is grossly premature. And I got called out in the comments section, and I responded, and I also fixed what I wrote to say, what I meant to say all along, which is the window is closing with respect to projecting into the future what you can get out of a draft pick. If the guy's 5 years away and he finally comes through the year after McDavid is done, then he's not going to help you as much as maybe something you can get in the shorter term. So I want to kind of on the fence in terms, I really hate going into a draft down picks. And I really hate it when they first of all, they got weakness in their lineup because they haven't converted picks in the past into decent players who can play middle six and, support roles on the team, to the point that they wind up having holes that need to be filled, band-aided in the short term by trading away a third or a fourth or a fifth round pick to get, Mike Brown or Jared Smithson or Mark Fistrick or Ben Scrivens, and I've just done it over and over again. But my bigger criticism is they never seem to ever win those trades. I mean, they got Patrick Maroon. That was one decent trade that they made of a pick for a player, but the Band-Aids never seem to stop the bleeding. So that's my bigger criticism. Win a trade. Let's win a freaking trade once in a while.
So what do you think about the Hyman thing, though, Bruce?
Well, yeah. Sorry. Let's go back to Hyman. That's more. I mean, it's a parallel branch of the same kind of thinking that that you can look at that contract and say 8 years. That's insane. He's going to be 36 at the end of it, and they're still going to be paying him $5 million, and the chances of him covering that bet are pretty slim. But you know what? The first 4 years of that contract are more important than the second four. And if you can bring the drive the value or the cap hit down by extending the contract, there's an actuarial argument that can be made in favor of it. Even as the long-term outlook becomes poorer, it's not the long-term outlook that's most important. It's the short to medium-term outlook. And finding a winger for McDavid and Draisaitl, whichever way the line mates wind up working out, and clicking with McDavid seems to be tougher than you might expect. He's not Wayne Gretzky. It's a different style of player that will succeed and click with Connor McDavid. But Hyman is a reasonable bet. Like he's had 4 excellent years in a row, really 5 right from his rookie year. He was a 24-year-old rookie though, so he was a late bloomer, but he's always played with skill, or played part of the time with skill. He played with his top 3 line mates this year were Marner, Tavares, and Matthews. That's the 3 guys he played with the most. And that said, when Toronto came into Edmonton in late February, early March, and kicked the crap out of Edmonton 3 nights in a row by a combined score of 13-1, lest we forget, Hyman lined up on a line with Alexei Mikheyev and Pierre Engvall, Toronto's 3rd line. Not exactly, and they kicked the holy hell out of Edmonton, that line, in all 3 games. They were phenomenal. And Hyman was the driver on that line. Like I thought he was the best player, if not in the game, he was clearly the best player on a very strong line. And Edmonton just couldn't match those guys. Whereas Toronto could throw out that line against any Oiler line and not worry about, getting overmatched. So he does have some versatility, Hyman, and I see him as a very good offensive player. I'm getting mixed reviews on his defense, but I think he's a good, smart player, very competitive, very good F1, like first guy in, winning the battles in the corner, digging the puck out. You dig the puck out onto the right stick, and good things are going to happen.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're both coming around to this, Bruce. Like, because we were both fairly negative.
Well, they had to do something on the top 6, right? They had to. They've had 5 or 4 forwards in the top 6 that were any good.
This strikes me as a better bet. Like, I was thinking like go for the Tyson Barrie contract, right? Like Thomas Tatar or Jaden Schwartz.
Yep.
That's, they could still maybe get one of those guys.
Yep.
There might be a possibility to still bring in a player like that. So they're going with Hyman. Would I have preferred to go, if Hyman is a lot better than Tatar right now, and chances are he is, I guess I hadn't been thinking. What I've been thinking mostly is Milan Lucic and James Neal and all these other contracts that have worked out so badly. These contracts have just been one disaster after another. And just that thought, oh God, if we get in another one of these, this is it's so much riding on this contract. But on the other hand, that is also the reality of the NHL. There's only so many players you have the opportunity to get, and you got to bring them in on a term that will actually bring them in. And so if this is the deal, if this is the best they can do, this is a pretty good player, and he could help them compete for the Stanley Cup for the next 3 or 4 years. So the people defending this trade, of course, are bringing up names like the name that I brought up long ago. Like, you got to find your Chris Kunitz for.
I've seen other people repeating that lately.
Now they're saying like Hyman is going to be Chris Kunitz. Now I want him to be that, here's the thing: these players really are the exception to the general rule. The player like Kunitz, who can keep it going into his 30s, or the mandatory 1970 sports reference, Wayne Cashman, still going strong at 34, 35, 36 for the Boston Bruins. There are players, physical wingers, who do that. And hey, I hope Zach Hyman's that, but you can be honest about it and say he's got about a 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 chance of having that kind of longevity. It's not great odds that at age 35, 36, he's still going to be a pretty good player. More likely, he's not. So, but even with that in mind, could this work for the Oilers? And if it does, if it wins you a Stanley Cup in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years in the McDavid window, that's how you judge this trade, not what happens later. If you win a Stanley Cup, which is so hard to do, especially for Canadian teams, honestly, then this trade is a win. And this trade, in terms of winning the Stanley Cup, is a concrete move, a step forward in terms of winning that cup. So that's why I've come to support the move.
The cynical side of me says Oilers are looking to try and improve themselves so they can do better in the playoffs. So I know, let's go out and get a guy from Toronto Maple Leafs who haven't won a series since 2004.
There's lots of guys on the Toronto Maple Leafs I'd like on the Oilers. Honestly.
You look at Hyman's playoff record, and he scored 1 goal in all 5 years in the playoffs in 6 or 7 playoff games, 1 goal. This year he pumped 25 shots. So, that he was driving the play, but he wasn't able to solve Carey Price. And
Toronto was the better. Like, even in the last game, man, Toronto had way more scoring chances. I think anyway. Bruce, I want to get back to one thing you were talking about, the prospects. The poor drafting. And there is one difference right now. Like, we don't have a lot of draft picks going forward, and I agree that the new players like Xavier Bourgault, although with forwards, sometimes they can step up a lot quicker. Like, so if you drafted a goalie, like the window for a goalie is usually a lot longer than a forward. So this is another reason to take a forward who's old in his draft year, like Bourgault. He might actually in 1 or 2 or 3 years be helping the Oilers. That's a real possibility. Like, if he's going to pan out, these forwards often pan out fast. It's an easier position defensively, and offensive talent comes down to, God-given skill often. But the Oilers do have, for the first time, all kinds of players for the next 2 or 3 or 1 or 2 or 3 years are really going to help the Edmonton improve. And I'll just quickly go down our list of top 10 prospects on the Oilers: Evan Bouchard, Philip Broberry, Dylan Holloway, Dmitry Samorukov. So there's 4 players there who I'm really extremely bullish on. I think these are really good hockey players, and I would hate to see any of them traded this summer, which is, why I was with the Duncan Keith thing. When I heard possibility, maybe iffy Samorukov thing, I got so upset about that. And then just below that, there's Raphael Lavoie, Tyler Benson, Ryan McLeod, Carter Savoy. And then below that, there's William Lagesson, Michael Kesselring, Kirill Maximov, Tyler Tullio, Ilya Konovalov, Stuart Skinner, Cooper Marody, Philip Berglund. This is a list of, I think this is a list that the Oilers haven't had in a long time in terms of the cupboard is full in a way it hasn't been. So there is that.
Is our list better or worse than a typical NHL team? I mean, lots of NHL teams have the cupboards bulging with guys with promise. And, I won't deny that, all those guys have promise. Obviously, not all of them are going to make it. Hopefully more than, a better than average percentage of them make it. But is there...
You'd have to see the latest rankings from each of from people like Pronman and Wheeler rank those systems.
Right.
And I don't think the Oilers have been in the top 10, this list. If I'm not, but they might, do they have that right? They have more knowledge about all of these players than I do. So I've got to give them that. So in terms of ranking this list, you'd have to go with them over what I say. But what I'm saying is, compared to recent years on the Oilers, at least in the last 15 years, this is the best list the Oilers would have had since the early 2000s, when they had lots of good young players as well. Bruce, let's talk about this last thing, which is Kurt, and I don't know where Elliot Friedman said this, so I'm just going on Kurt Levin's reporting of this.
He said it on Tim and Sid. Kurt said, sent us a
he did
follow-up. And
do you want to? What did he say?
he says, yeah, he said it on Tim and Fred's on Sportsnet, and he paraphrasing. He said Elliott talked to an Oilers player who said it was a fact. What I put was a quote from Elliott, which is what you mentioned earlier about the 1-for-1 thing, which I don't have that specific one in front of me.
Here's Kurt's tweet that he put out in public about it. So this is so this was said on this Tim and Fred. Is that the new show?
Tim and Friends.
Tim and Friends. Okay, Fred Flintstone.
Sid,
all right.
Sid went away, and they now Tim and Friends.
Tim and Friends. All right, here's what Kurt tweeted. Elliot Friedman confirming that a factor in Adam Larson leaving Edmonton was the incessant, and Kurt says that's my word, not Elliot Friedman's. It was 1-for-1 drone from some in the market. Regarding the Hall trade, and another quote from Friedman was he never really felt comfortable. And Bruce, I was referencing this before, that I felt that there was over the top criticism of the player. And people might not think that that's criticism of the player, like saying, and Bob McKenzie was the one who made that remark, made that joke, and it's really on Bob McKenzie as much as it is, like, honestly, as much, but repeated endlessly. People think they're being funny, and it is funny. Like, and listen, fans have a right. This is really complicated. Fans have a right to say whatever they want on Twitter. Like, there's free speech. And if I was the PR person on an NHL team, I would say, unless you have a really, really good reason to be on Twitter, you must stay off social media. You should stay off social media. In fact, we're going to go around and delete it. And, if someone really objects to that, you would say, okay, you stay on social media. Everybody else, delete your Twitter, delete your Facebook, delete your Instagram, or have somebody else run it and never go on it yourself. Never read.
With a thick skin on it.
Never read. And then also tell your family and friends, whatever they read, whatever they hear on the Cult of Hockey podcast and all the other podcasts and radio, don't ever tell the player. Never mention it. Don't ever say it. That would be the rule that I would try to get through to the players. And if they were on it, I would say block people incessantly. In real life, Bruce, when we're dealing with people who are negative, nasty, aggressive, the smart person shuts those people out of their life. I don't see why it would be any different on social media. There's this whole idea on social media that you shouldn't block people. I completely disagree with it. I think it's bad advice. It's bad advice for anyone, NHL hockey players and everybody else. If you're getting harassed by people, block them. It's what we do in our lives. It's what we should do on social media. It should become the norm on social media. It should be considered a good thing. And I think people will start to have a better experience. The final thing I want to say on this is, I think this goes to me and you as well. We engage in criticism, and I'm probably more critical than you are, I think. So we engage in criticism of players, criticism of the GM, the coach, everyone. And it's just a reminder, just tone it down a little. Think about it. Try to criticize the performance as opposed to the person. Don't be personally insulting if you can avoid that. Think about the person you're writing about who might read that comment and what impact it might have on them. This is impressed on us in the newsroom that what we write is, well, it's if it's defamatory, you can get sued. Right. And you also have to comport yourself with some good taste. If think about the other person. And that's my final thought on it. And I'm going to think about that too. Just in terms of criticizing these players and everyone else involved in the Oilers organization, just take a step back now and then and calm down a bit.
Yeah, well, I think lots of the 1-for-1 trade with 1-for-1 criticism was in fact directed at Peter Chiarelli. But Adam Larson was definitely caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, he wouldn't feel, yeah.
People thought it was a bad trade, didn't necessarily blame Larson, but every time that statement was made, he was being compared unfavorably to another past Oiler. And I'm not sure what it accomplished. Kurt also points out that other factors that Friedman mentioned besides that for Larson's decision was Oscar Klefbom leaving the team, effectively his best friend and longtime defense
That's what I
partner. And
thought.
last year he played with 5 different partners that ran the gamut from, mistake-prone kids to sluggish veterans, and anything in between. So he didn't really have a lot of constancy there. And also his father passing away in Edmonton, which I've mentioned myself, is just something that was just a hammer on Adam Larson. And that was a horrible thing that happened with Robert Larson.
In terms of the timing, Bruce, when Holland spelled out the timing issue of the trade, sounded like it fell apart at about the same moment that it became clear that Oscar Klefbom wasn't going to be back in Edmonton this year, and probably isn't going to be back at all. It seemed like there was a coincidence of timing where it went from really positive vibes to something changed then. So it's not surprising to hear that was a factor. Klefbom not coming back, you lose your best buddy, and that changes a lot. So, yeah, good luck to Adam Larson. Like, he's such a fantastic hockey player, and I really hate the Kraken. I really hate the Kraken for signing one of my favorite hockey players. I'm not going to forgive them, but I don't hold anything against Adam Larson. He gave his all for the Edmonton Oilers, and just a great hockey player. I wish he was still with the Oilers. It's a big loss that they're huge loss that they're trying to fill today.
I watched a little bit of the podcast we put together that night, and man, I looked depressed. From beginning to end, I was glum.
Yeah, we were.
Just a personal favorite of mine for reasons given over the years of just style of play and his role defending the honor of his goalie.
It seems like there might be some. I don't know what the Oilers are going to like. Rasmus Ristolainen commanded a huge price. And again, this is a player I'm not that familiar with, but from what I do have seen of him, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Jani Pitkanen, kind of a high event hockey player. So I wasn't too upset when the Oilers missed out, especially when I saw the price the Philadelphia Flyers paid for Rasmus Ristolainen, a first and a second pick.
And a good player, Robert Hagg, like a good young defense.
Yeah, good young D-man. So high price for Ristolainen. Other options will present themselves. Tyson Barrie may come back. That's one possibility. And then you'd have to get your big Bobby Clobber on the left side, right? You'd have to for your third pairing on the left side, you'd need a really rough physical player.
I think they got to look at Kulikov. Like he seemed redundant with Larson. Without Larson, he brings something that, there's aspects of his game that he brings that are useful, I think. Like he's a mean stand-up kind of guy as well, and plays a hard game. Like they got to look at it. I'm not saying they got to do it. I'm just saying they got to sort of reconsider in light of the fact they now need that style of defenseman that he fits. That maybe.
He's a little high event. I like Cuckoo's play a lot better. Like I really liked Slater Cuckoo last year. I thought he was solid positionally, moving the puck. But he's not that guy. He's not the rough tough guy. So anyway, some names have come up like Josh Manson, who was an absolutely fantastic young hockey player in the 2017 playoffs for Anaheim. Puck moving defenseman who is absolutely fierce. He's since had injury problems, has missed a lot of time. But the Oilers will have some inside information on him, Bruce, from his dad, who's with the Oilers organization. So Dave Madsen is the assistant coach in Bakersfield. And, they'll know where Josh is at. He's got a year left on his contract in Anaheim. That strikes me as a really interesting idea, is Josh Madsen. If they're getting positive reports about how healthy he is.
Right.
I don't really know what else is out there, but in terms of that kind of player, but man, that would be interesting. That would be an interesting signing. Also a rumor about Ethan Bear. Frank Saravalli's talking about Ethan Bear on his trade list. The only way I could see that happening is if they sign Tyson Barrie and they really need
that's what he's guessing.
Yeah, they really need then to trade Ethan Bear for a goalie or a third line center or a different kind of defenseman. It's kind of a one-for-one. So I don't think anyone wants to see Ethan Bear traded. He's a fan favorite. He's a young player developed in the organization who's developing and getting better. and by the end of the second half of last regular season was playing really strong hockey for the Oilers. So no one wants to see him traded, but you could see if they have to get the right mix that might happen.
Well, if they got to get the right mix, my suggestion is don't sign Tyson Barrie. Find someone else that makes for the right mix. Because even if you get rid of Ethan Barrie, you still have Evan Bouchard and Tyson Barrie, with Barrie sort of roadblocking Bouchard from the things that he could do well. And what happens if Bouchard blossoms? Now all of a sudden Barrie is almost redundant, and you're signing him to a 3 or 4 year deal at, $4.5 or $5 million or whatever they come in at, and I'm not sure that's the play. Just because he's the guy they can talk to right now doesn't mean he's the one and only solution. I mean,
that's fair
all
enough.
Along their play has been Bouchard is ready to move up and take a more responsible role, and he's more fits the Barrie role and certainly the Larson role. I mean, so they just have to rethink it.
Bear was a better defensive player than Tyson Barrie. Tyson Barrie was, according to the work we do on scoring chances, he was the weakest defender when it came to stopping scoring chances. He just leaked more than anybody else, and struggled in that area. Bear was considerably better, especially as the year went on. Ethan Bear got, he had a few down moments in the playoffs, but he was pretty strong hockey in the last 20 games of the season from Ethan Bear. So,
well, my thought is they could take the $4 million a year they were paying Adam Larson and the $4 million that they paid Tyson Barrie last year, and go and offer $8 million to Dougie Hamilton, see what happens. Because they got two young, cheap defensemen locked up in Barron Bouchard. And if you get one sort of all-purpose big minute muncher guy at the top of the lineup, I think there's worse solutions than that. But Ken Holland put pay to that yesterday in the press conference. He said they had no intention of big game hunting on the Blue. When really, like say, if you look at the budget in those terms, the money is maybe there, but I guess it isn't. So, one other thing today, besides Rasmus Ristolainen, the number 8 overall pick in 2013, the number 4 pick from that same draft, Seth Jones, another big right shot defenseman, got dealt to Chicago in a major exchange that saw Adam Boqvist, a first and a second and a future first all go from Chicago to Columbus. Columbus sent the last pick in the first round to Chicago, but Columbus got a harvest of draft choices and Adam Boqvist for Seth Jones. But I look at that trade and think, Edmonton set that up for Chicago. They couldn't have done it better. They took all of Duncan Keith's cap hit. They opened up $5.5 million of cap room for Chicago, and they sent Seth Jones' brother, for Pete's sake, to Chicago. And for doing those significant favors for Chicago and their now successful bid to get Seth Jones, Edmonton had the wound up paying the draft choice. I still don't understand it, David. I just don't understand how that trade worked. And I think Ken Holland got taken to the cleaners on that trade. And I turn around lately,
Bruce,
and he says you can't trade him for nothing. And yet you turn around and you see Islanders trading an old contract to Arizona with 3 high draft picks just to get rid of the contract. And then you see Philadelphia sending Gostisbehere and 2 draft picks to Arizona, nothing in return. They traded them for nothing. I'm not saying Gostisbehere or Ladd, it's Duncan Keith. I'm saying, though, that all of them are overpaid players for the stage they are in their career, and yet somehow Edmonton gave up asset after asset after asset, and they set up Chicago for getting Seth Jones. So
yeah, I had kind of a different thought, honestly. Like I'm not disagreeing actually with anything you're saying. I just had a different thought, and it was looks like the price for good defensemen is pretty high right now in the NHL. So if you and your scouts have looked at Duncan Keith and you think he's a good defenseman, then you're okay with paying that price. And this is the price for a good defenseman in the NHL. Now, the question comes, so that was the thought when I saw the price for Seth Jones and Ristolainen. So we'll see. It all comes down to how Duncan Keith performs this year. And again, I didn't see him play, so I'm going to just withhold reserve judgment on that. The other trade was OEL, Bruce, which is, the Oilers have been, it was a really interesting trade, and I don't know what people are thinking of it. I actually thought Vancouver came out pretty well on that trade. It struck me. They got rid of some terrible contracts, but they were all expiring contracts, just 1-year deals. So I guess it really does come down to how well OEL plays as well, and I have big questions about that. They could have moved from some bad contracts that they just had and moved out to another bad contract that they're going to have. They moved out Louis Eriksson. The OEL in 2 or 3 years could be the new Louis Eriksson, or he could rebound and have a second a rebirth in Vancouver and be what he was before. But they also got Connor Garland, who is a really good young attacking hockey player. And suddenly the Canucks, that for next year, at least, Bruce, OEL's he's not that old yet and could easily rebound for the next couple of years. And they got this Connor Garland. I like that trade from the Vancouver perspective. What about you?
Cost them a first-round pick, but they got rid of three stinky contracts. They got, not only Louis Eriksson and his $6 million, but Antoine Roussel and his $3 million, and Jay Beagle and his $3 million. All of them only had a year to run, but this year coming up, Vancouver saves $12 million, and even though they're paying OEL $8.25, they're actually coming out ahead more than enough to pay Connor Garland. So in the short term, Vancouver comes out of that well. In the longer term, of course, they have that OEL contract for years to come, whereas all those other ones that they just dumped were all going to be gone next year anyway. They just got rid of them a year early. But it changes the equation in the immediate short term in the Pacific Division. I think Vancouver is going to be a lot tougher team next year than they were setting up to be, and very proactive. Like that's 3 pretty big name defensemen that all got moved today, isn't it? And here just one last thought on Seth Jones. He has 1 year to run on his contract from Columbus, $5.4 million. So next year, 26-year-old Seth Jones is going to be turning 27, I guess, is going to be lower cap hit than Duncan Keith.
Quinn Hughes is also a left shot defenseman. So OEL is going to find himself in the same position that he found himself in Arizona, unless he switches sides, being the second left shot. He's a lot of money. What is it, $8.25 million per year for the next 6 or 7 years?
There was no retention, was there at all?
Maybe in the first year. I can't recall. Yeah. It's interesting times in the NHL, Bruce. I hope that the Oilers, that Ken Holland has a few, this bag of tricks is not empty, and he's going to, there were some good signings last year, the Barry signing, top of that list. And I hope that we're going to be pleasantly surprised with a few more moves. And if not, like I've said this before, and I repeated it tonight, there are all these young players coming up, and I'd love to see some of them get a chance this year. Marody and Benson at the top of that list, and Dylan Holloway closing in on that, and of course Evan Bouchard. So yeah, we'll see what happens. We will see what happens.
Yes, there is retained salary on OEL. It looks like about $1 million. I'm having trouble finding the actual line here, but it looks like, yeah, here it is, 12%. So $990,000 retained by Arizona on that. So brings them down a little bit towards. Now, one last thought on Seth Jones. He did sign an 8-year extension with his new team. I'm not sure how that worked because I thought it had to be 7 years unless you've been with the team for a while. But he signed an 8-year extension, and it starts in 2022. So if you look him up in Cap Friendly or Puckpedia, you'll see a contract that expires in 2029, 30. First one of those that I've seen. But also $9.5 million. And you know darn well that Darnell Nurse's agent's going to be looking at that and saying, that's our comparable right there, Seth Jones.
I hope not. I hope not.
Well, I mean, they're setting the market.
Well, yeah, we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Nurse can be re-signed as of
Yep. Like
July
Seth
28th.
Jones, he can be signed once you get to the off season. So
Of course, some people are saying, grind him down, don't, because he had a good high percentage shooting year. And this is a fair point. This is true. I think it's true. His point total is a bit inflated. That said, having just been through this Larson thing, the whole idea of grinding people down, I don't know. I think in theory, people who have never negotiated much in their life are really big on let's grind them down. And maybe some of them have negotiated things that I'm not giving them proper credit. Maybe they would be better negotiators than most NHL GMs. Certainly in the Peter Chiarelli era, we were left wondering about some of his negotiation skills. I don't know. Grind down Darnell Nurse. I just as soon see him signed long term as soon as possible. I think that would be the best thing for the stability of the Oilers franchise going forward. He's not that old. He can easily, Darnell Nurse can really skate. I think he'll be okay value through the life of that contract. I want to see him get signed. That's my thought on that.
Well, Chicago sure wanted to see Seth Jones get signed. They didn't just want that last year. They immediately came to terms with him on a very rich, $76 million contract.
Ooh, lordy.
Yeah.
Lordy. All right, Bruce. Any other thoughts? We got the draft tomorrow. Maybe if there's we probably won't do a podcast tomorrow. These are low round draft picks, so we'll just see unless there's a big move. But I'm even with what happened with Larson this week, the Hyman thing. It was funny when Friedman said it was a done deal. I was as negative as I had been initially on the trade. When he said it was a done deal, I felt happy. So it made me realize I was hoping that this was going to go ahead, and I had to think, okay, why is that? Sort it through. So I do think there are some good reasons for it, but part of it could just be emotional, like jilted by Larson. I want to see someone pick Edmonton, so I'll cop to that may be part of the what's going on with this particular Oilers fan.
I felt the same way when Lucic picked Edmonton. I knew it was a sugar high, but it was,
that's a good way to put it.
Big NHL, highly recognized NHL player chooses Edmonton, and in that case, he actually had a higher money offer somewhere else, but he chose to come to Edmonton. But we've lived to rue that day.
One final thought that I was thinking of is like in the last 3 or 4 years, Bruce, through injury and other issues, the Oilers have lost 3 really good top 4 D-men in Andrei Sekera, Oscar Klefbom, and Adam Larson. Yep. That's a really tough thing.
Yep.
Like in terms of the Oilers going forward, this is a really tough thing to deal with for any franchise to lose players like that. And it hasn't been easy for Edmonton. They only rebounded from Sekera, after McDavid and Draisaitl kind of picked it up on the power play, especially. The power play made up for a lot of things. Mike Smith came and helped in net, and Adam Larson rebounded on defense in a significant way. And that helped them get through Sekera. Then the Klefbom thing happens. Now this with Larson. They need more help on defense, and we'll see what they can do. I guess that's where I'll leave it.
Can't disagree.
Bruce, thanks for talking tonight.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.